Why did Dallas do what it did? We'll ask an expert that knows. What's next for Bill? We actually have an answer for you. And the truth about Harbaugh, all that plus our Wolfpack grows by 1, and we rate the pressure. All of that and more, because it's time for Zero Blitz. It's Zero Blitz. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz, which, you know what? I'm sorry, like, it's Zero Blitz with Fitz and Frank. Feels like Frank, that feels like it's got a nice little ring to it. My name goes first because I talk first and I had that power. Are you okay with this at this point?
Wouldn't it be Zero Blitz with Frank and Fitz? Like, that makes sense, right? The rhyming.
Oh, man, it does actually sound
right?
better, though.
Like,
son of a biscuit, my name never goes first.
I mean, that was you just set me up for that, didn't you?
No,
that was too easy. That was way too easy.
Now that's what it is. Zero Blitz with Frank and Fitz. Oh, man. Someday it'll come first. By the way, if you follow us on social media, you should follow us on social media. We had a bet going into last weekend's games. As a result, Frank has had to change because he lost the bet thanks to one game, Tampa Bay. He lost the bet. He's had to change the banner on his X profile to be Coach K. We want it to be a painful sports memory. But I also feel like this only speaks to our teamwork, because what was your painful sports memory involving Coach K that you put on?
I mean, as people may know about me, I am a University of Wisconsin alum, big fan of the basketball team, and I will never, it's been almost 9 years, and I still think about them blowing a 9-point lead in the second half of the national title game in 2015, at least 4 times a week. Like, I mean, just pop in my head of like, man, they're never getting the shot again. They had a 9-point lead in the second half. So having to see Coach K every day now on my Twitter feed, yes, I very much appreciate that. That's awful. That's ruining my week.
9 years is child's play, because I will remind everybody, I have one VHS tape from my entire childhood. For everything I ever did in my life, I have one tape. It doesn't even involve me. And all it says on the side of it is 103-73. Because if you grew up in Vegas when I was a kid, that national championship blowout win over Duke is one of the defining moments. But man, a year later, that UNLV team was even better. They were undefeated. My parents had moved to the East Coast, so I was like really holding on to UNLV as like my beacon of home. You know, we're all the way in the East Coast, but UNLV represented something larger than all of that. And that's the year that I remember where I was. I remember with my dad in the car listening on the radio as UNLV lost the Final Four matchup to Duke. And many years later, I met Jay Will. We became friends. He obviously wasn't on that team, but famous Duke alumni. And the first thing I said to Jay Will when I met him was like, man, I respect your game so much. By the way, I effing hate Duke. Like, that's the first thing I said to him. So we share this. Like, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know. I don't feel any peace out of this. Like, it was supposed to hurt you. I feel like it brought back my own hurt. Now we need therapy together.
I guess we will hate Duke together, because I love that UNLV team too. Of all the like teams, you know, we all have favorite teams, right? Everybody listening has favorite teams. But there's some team out there that is not a part of that group. Like, all my teams are Milwaukee, Wisconsin, whatever. The UNLV 1990-91 teams are probably my favorite team of all time that isn't involved in my group of actual favorite teams, because that was the coolest team ever. Like, I mean, with them going to Arkansas in 91, like, they played about an 8-minute stretch of the best college basketball I've ever seen or ever will see. Like, is in the second half. Go watch on YouTube. It's out there. That team was awesome. It was cool. It was great. So I'm with you on that too. That's another reason I hate Duke. Just more reason to hate Duke around here.
You know, it's funny because years ago, we were playing in Boise and we had the day off. And so the day off that we had, it happened to be UNLV men's basketball was playing Boise State. So I went to the game, and shocking to most people, pretty easy to get a ticket right behind the bench. So I was sitting right behind the bench. And at the time, Stacey Augmon was a bench coach for the Rebels. And I spent the whole time just staring, and I didn't have the you-know-whats to go up and ask him for anything. And to this day, I regret it. Like, I had a program, I had something, I should have had Stacey Augmon. And in the future, if I ever see Stacey again, I don't care where it is, because he was my favorite. Like, everybody else, I have a signed Larry Johnson jersey. I have that, but Stacey Augmon was my favorite. By the way, Stone, make a note, off-season topic for this show. What was your side piece team? Everybody has one.
Everybody, at least one that you're like this greatest show on turf or whatever it is, like the Bulls team with Jordan, whatever. For mine was UNLV completely. For me, it was definitely Jim McMahon with that version of the Chicago Bears. Jim McMahon was so cool. Oh, I thought, I had like a little crush for a minute on the Bears because Jim McMahon's so cool. We'll get into that in the offseason. In the meantime, over the course of this show, Michael Lombardi is going to hang out with us. I'll ask Michael
Michael everything you need to know about the coaching carousel. We will get you the latest, greatest insight from him on what's happened in Dallas, what could happen in Philly, what will happen for Harbaugh. Got a lot to get to with Michael, and Frank and I are going to break down everything you need to know about the divisional playoffs, but not in the way most people do. Now, we're not just going to sit here and try and X's and O's our way through these games. We're instead going to go with the very simple concept of the pressure cooker. I like to make food, and I like to accelerate that process. So I personally am a fan of the pressure cooker. Got to figure that out, though. The timing on the pressure cooker can really ruin meat. So we're going to go with the pressure cooker analogy here. But what we're going to do, Frank, is we're going to look at each game, and we're going to figure out who's in the pressure cooker the most with the game. And let's start with the Texans-Ravens, where I think I can say safely on behalf of the entire sports world, I don't think there's anybody this weekend, this month, maybe this year in all of professional sports that will be under more pressure than Lamar Jackson will be in this one playoff game, because he can look like a golden god through the regular season. But if he comes out and plays poorly in this game against the Texans, the narrative on Lamar will snap back in such a violent way. People will want to question everything about his ability to play the game. I don't think you can have more pressure physically, emotionally, or mentally than Lamar Jackson will have on him this weekend.
There's a ton. There's no question about that. I'm trying to think, as you even said that, like Shohei Ohtani, the $700 million man, does he have more pressure? I bet when we get to September, Mike McCarthy is going to have a little more pressure on him. But you're right. Lamar's in that group of people want reasons to diss him, to bring him down. Not a lot of people. I think it's a very vocal minority. But it's true. Like, at some point, you do have to take a step back and say, well, Lamar hasn't done it in the playoffs. He hasn't been good in the playoffs. If you look, he's going to win a second MVP. We all know that. We saw the All-Pro voting. Winning a second MVP. Every single multiple MVP in NFL history is either in the Hall of Fame or he's Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson now in a couple of weeks. But you're like you said, what is Lamar's legacy in this game if he never makes a playoff run? I think at some point it's going to happen, because I don't buy that the playoffs are this different animal. Like, you hear that all the time. The playoffs are so much different. Yes, I guess it plays a little different, but it's still NFL football. It's not like he's playing basketball all of a sudden. He's still playing quarterback for an NFL team. It just hasn't happened yet. There's no fatal flaw in Lamar Jackson's game that somehow he can't play in the playoffs. It just hasn't happened. Maybe he has got, succumbed to the pressure a couple times. It gets to people. Got to Dak Prescott last week. I think we'd agree on that. So you're right. This is huge for Lamar in his legacy. Quarterbacks are judged on Super Bowls. If you're Dan Fouts, you probably don't get your due because you never made a Super Bowl. And Lamar Jackson might be heading that way too. He's got a long career ahead of him. He's 26 years old. He's got a long time to win a Super Bowl here. But this is his look. You don't get chances year after year. Ask Jalen Hurts, right? Like the Eagles. Nothing's guaranteed next year just because you're great this year. This is an excellent opportunity for a Ravens team that arguably it has to be considered the best in football, considering what they did to the 49ers. So this is Lamar's time. He's under the pressure.
I feel like one of the fatal flaws in football coverage for fans and media alike at this point is that everybody has to prove that what they thought was right from a week ago. And the hardest part about Lamar is like, that continues to move its way forward all the way back to when he was drafted. There were a lot of people when he was drafted that said he couldn't play. So now those people want to be right at some level. There were people that when he was drafted said, well, it's going to take forever for him to say he'll never be a good enough passer. Those people are going to continue to be dug in on that. Then there's the extra crowd of everybody that wants to turn around and say, well, you can't pay him that. There's no way he's worth that money. Everybody has had a hot take on Lamar. And because we as a society no longer want to step up and say, wow, the information has changed and now I've changed my mind, it almost feels like it's just not allowed to be real. Like, I think the best way that we could give justice to any player or team as we cover them is to be honest about the information's changed and we've evolved our thinking. Like, that's what we should be doing as grown-ups, Frank. Like, I think it's okay to say, hey, there have been times when Lamar has struggled. I think it's okay to say, you know what, he struggled in his first playoff game, looked like a shell of himself, okay? Maybe the moment was too big. But I also think it's okay in a world where we love to say any given Sunday is the very appeal to the NFL, then isn't it possible that on any given Sunday in the playoffs, you lay an egg, or any given Sunday in the playoffs, you're super hot? Like, sometimes it can just be one game. And the problem is in the playoffs, you only have a one-game game sample size. So that means everybody has to make that one game absolutely everything. I just feel like the body of work requires that every once in a while you take all the information you forget it all, and you rebuild it. And if you did that today with Lamar Jackson, you would discover that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that's been absolutely incredible and has yet to really go on a playoff run. Like, that's the simple take on it that nobody seems to want to give.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go back, me and you are old enough to remember this, but 1989, what were people saying about Michael Jordan? He can't win. He's just a scorer. Can't win. Well, he ended up winning a few and changed his legacy a little bit, right? I think if Michael Jordan lived today as an NFL quarterback somehow, when he's hitting a shot over Byron Russell, people would still be saying, I don't know, might not be that good. Like, people hate, like you're right. People hang on to these things.
Let me add to that. Like John Elway. Remember when it was, John Elway can get you there, but he can't win a Super Bowl. Remember when it was Peyton Manning can't win the big game, couldn't beat Florida in college, can't figure out how to beat Brady, Manning can't win it. Like, that was real. People actually said that and died on those very stupid hills.
Right. And people just hang on to their takes forever. And I think a lot of it is draft related. Everybody's a draft expert now. So you can't be wrong about your take. And, that's why we see some wild stuff being talked about. And that's what frustrates me about a lot of NFL narratives. And I'm going to be, look, I have nothing against the Texans. I have nothing against CJ Stroud, any of those people. Great, whatever. I'm legitimately rooting for Lamar. And this is maybe a dumb reason to do it, but just so I don't have to hear the nonsense anymore about Lamar. Like, it's just like, oh, he's really not that good. Look, he's 1-3 in the playoffs. Well, no quarterback owns a record. And no, he hasn't played well, but it doesn't mean he can't play well. Like, there's no fatal flaw to his game that he can't play well in the playoffs. It just hasn't happened for him yet. Like, it didn't happen for Manning for a while. It didn't happen for Elway until right at the end. So I just want the noise to end on Lamar. And real quick, can I give you the list of multiple these? This is the group Lamar Jackson is entering when he wins his second MVP. This is a who's who of NFL legends: Mahomes, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Jim Brown, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana, Kurt Warner, Steve Young. Those are the multiple MVPs in NFL history. This guy's going to the Hall of Fame, but there'll be people who say, well, he never won a Super Bowl. He's not that great. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Remember that in today's world, there'll be people saying, well, Kurt Warner's not all that good. It's the weapons around him, right? I mean, that's the world. It's pretty wild to me. And this is the best context I can put around it. To me, there's one player in all of the playoffs that is not going to be afforded the grace of having a bad throw, a bad drive, a bad quarter, or a bad game. And that's Lamar Jackson. And it's stupid to me to think as we hit the divisional round, I'm not just talking about this weekend, the divisional round into the championship round, into the Super Bowl. If at any point Lamar falls off just the slightest, there's a whole group of piranhas waiting to just absolutely come to him and try and say, I was right, you were wrong. Instead of looking at it and saying, you know what, this season, second MVP, this is the sort of season you tell your grandkids about, because when your grandkids are sitting there looking at another quarterback, you're going to say, oh, but you don't understand. I watched Lamar, right? Like, that's real. We both know that. That's same with LeBron. Everybody today that's questioning LeBron is going to be telling their great grandkids, oh, that's nothing. I saw LeBron when he did this and that. Like, that's the way the world works.
It is. On the other side, though, it's a good comparison because CJ Stroud could go out and have a bad game here. I don't think narrative on him changes at all. It's going to be, well, they lost to the Ravens, whatever. That is a house money team right now. I mean, they shouldn't have been here. They shouldn't even been in the playoffs, considering where they were back in January before they hired D'Amico. So you look at the difference between the two quarterbacks in this game. CJ Stroud has had this storybook rookie season, and even if it ends on Saturday, no big deal, and it's totally justified and fine no matter how bad he plays. I don't think anything's going to change with him. But yet Lamar, like you said, he won't be afforded anything. He has a bad quarter. Twitter's going to go crazy. This is a legacy defining postseason for Lamar Jackson, one way or another, really. I mean, it could change. It could even change. He does the Elway thing and he wins a Super Bowl at age 31. I mean, that obviously erases what happened in 2024. But yes, Lamar's put himself in a position where he's unfairly just going to be judged on these 3-hour clips. Every playoff game is going to be a referendum on his entire career.
Hell, even if he plays lights out and the Ravens lose, it'll be like, see, doesn't even lead to a win.
He can't not a winner. Like, come on, let's not do that.
So let's move to the next Saturday game. You talk about social media. Social media erupting. Yahoo Sports pointed out on Twitter the other day that 86% of the bets right now are on the Packers to beat the 49ers. 86% of America apparently wants to lose money. I don't see it happening. But when we start to look at this game particularly and say pressure, I mean, I hate to just stick with quarterbacks here, Frank, but it feels like the pressure on Brock Purdy is mounting. Remember, the last time we saw the 49ers in the playoffs, he wasn't there. And now you've got this constant, Brock Purdy's become the new Joe Flacco. Is Brock Purdy elite conversation? Right. It feels like there's a pressure cooker at this point on Purdy. Does he have the most pressure in this game?
I don't know. I think he probably at the end of the day, he does. But I also want to say, if Kyle Shanahan loses this, we've all talked about Kyle, and look, he's obviously a brilliant coach. He's great. His dad was a great coach who I covered for a while. Not that we got along that well, but he's a great coach. He's passed that on to Kyle, who's taken every team he's with, every offense he's with is improved dramatically. Like he turned Brock Purdy into a star. Like he's a big part of that. Whether Brock had a lot to do with that too. I'm not saying that, but you go back and what are the narratives on Kyle Shanahan right now? It's 28-3. It's blowing that Super Bowl. It's blowing the NFC Championship game against the Rams. And now if you look, the NFC is wide open for the 49ers. Once the Cowboys lost it, get your Cowboys jokes out of the way. I'm fine with that, whatever. The Cowboys were the one team talent-wise that could match up with the 49ers. I think we'd agree with that. Like that, as I sit here today, look, upsets happen, crazy things happen in the playoffs, crazy things happen in the NFL. I cannot see any of the other three NFC teams winning in Santa Clara over the next 2 weeks. I just can't. I can't even really envision it. It might happen, but I can't sit here and pick it. I can't tell you I feel confident picking the Lions to go there and beat them or anything. So when you have a path this wide open, if you go one and done against the Packers, a team that needed to win its final three games just to make the playoffs, like I think a lot's going to come down on Kyle, and we're going to start looking at his playoff failures in a different way. Again, I don't think this stuff is always fair. Judge it like we talked about Lamar. Judging guys on what happens over a 3-hour stretch in one game against another playoff team is usually unfair to whatever individuals there. But it goes for, I think the narrative would go from Kyle Shanahan's this unbelievably great coach who's figured out how to beat the NFL with his offense to, what about all these playoff failures? He hasn't won a ring yet. I think that would come on him a little bit. And but to your point too, Purdy's in that same boat where people say, look, well, Brock Purdy stinks. He lost, whatever. Like, not fair, but that's what's going to happen.
I think you're right, though, and you've talked me into it. I think Shanahan's a better answer here, and it has to do with a couple of things. The roster and the way it's built. I mean, the 49ers are a better team than the Packers. Hot take, right? 49ers are a better team than everybody left in the NFL, talent-wise, top to bottom. Hot take, right? So they're not better on the field than the Ravens, but they at least on paper, if we were playing Madden, you would take the 49ers over the rest of the NFC, right? So they're a better team. Also, look at the playoff failings. And I'm going to say failings, like all the way back to Atlanta 28-3, where Falcons fans will continue to yell about the play calling late in that game, all the way into the opportunity that they had with Jimmy G as their quarterback. How much different is the narrative on Jimmy G if that fourth quarter goes differently in the Super Bowl, right?
Like if they can, and that's a crazy thing. Like I want to just pause real quick to talk about this. Jimmy G is a perfect example. His entire career is different. If the 49ers defense defends Jet Wasp or whatever, Jet Wasp, you know what play I'm talking about, the deep one, the 3rd and 15 to Tyreek Hill. Like Jimmy G wasn't even on the field. And yet his entire career, his entire legacy, his entire thing changes if the 49ers defense covers Tyreek Hill on that one play. That's the kind of stuff we talk about.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden Jimmy G becomes, well, of course he can get you to a Super Bowl. He won one with San Francisco.
He won one with San Francisco.
That's the way we would count. You're 1,000% right. So you look at some of the failings of the 49ers, and then you look at windows. Like I'm not a huge believer in the window conversation all the time. Like I think we've overblown Buffalo's window closing. But if you're the 49ers, I mean, you do have some of the elite talent in the NFL right now. So you are in a window where there's an expectation of greatness. If the 49ers lose this game, you would have to think that some level of it would be because they were outcoached. And if they're outcoached, then we're allowed to ask questions about Kyle Shanahan. I think this is like, it took me a second to get there down the path, but I'm with you. I think there's more pressure on Shanahan in this game than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, again, legacy like when you get this deep into playoffs, these are legacy defining games. Again, right or wrong, fair or not, this is legacy defining. And again, one and done to this Packers team. I mean, this Packers team's hot. I don't think they win, but I can't say they absolutely can't. Like, if you could beat the Cowboys like you beat them, you could beat the 49. You could beat anybody. If you play that way, you could beat anybody.
I don't think there's necessarily pressure on Jordan Love, but tell me this. If Jordan Love comes out and looks like the Jordan Love early in the season, are we going to turn around?
Love, right?
Are we then going to change? Will anything that happens now moving forward change the thought on Jordan Love?
Maybe a little bit. It's been funny to watch because I'm a little, I hate to say this, uncomfortable just anointing Jordan Love already. Like, he's been awesome. Like, I mean, second half of the season has been, but it's 9 games. And what, I mean, look at the competition. It hasn't been incredible. Like, it's just funny that everybody was kind of just whatever about Jordan Love. And then he plays great against the Cowboys. He was phenomenal in that game. And everybody's just, oh yeah, Jordan Love, Packers got a new superstar. I'm kind of on board with it, but a little bit like, are we positive? Are we sure that just these 9 games? I think Jordan Love's a really good quarterback, but it has just been 9 great games in this stretch. And if he does struggle against San Francisco, which he could, great defense, obviously, really well coached, Steve Wilkes over there. Yes, I do think you have to at least be a little skeptical going forward that it's just the next Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, I think people have just bought into that really, really quickly. And yes, if a bad game for Jordan Love here, and at least you have to do a double take. Like, really? We're going to look back and say, okay, he drummed the Vikings and the Bears and the Panthers. What does that really mean in the grand scheme of things?
All right. Yeah. So as Stone has pointed out to me in our peek behind the curtain here, as we go through these, we should probably make picks too. Another bet. Do we have another bet on this one? Let's I
can't deal with Coach K another week. Come on.
There's no Coach K for another week. We'll let Stone pick another bet for us, but we'll make another bet on this one. Texans, Ravens, who you got in this game?
I'm going with the Ravens and to cover the spread. I just think this Ravens team has blown out a lot of good teams this year, and I just find this to be the end of the road for this Texans story. Nothing against Texans, nothing against C.J. Stroud. I'm all in on C.J. Stroud, as you well know, but I just think there's a bad spot for the Texans against a rested Ravens team.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, by the way. So we agree on that game. And we were just talking Packers, 49ers. I have the 49ers rolling in this game. But man, I don't know. That was a heavy spread, wasn't it? I'm trying to find the point spread on it. 9.5 is a lot of points, man. Like, I think the 49ers win this game, but 9.5 just feels. Does that feel big to you? Does that feel beefy? Does that feel thick with 2 C's?
I will say that I like the Packers to cover in this game, or the 49ers to win. But would it surprise you if it's 21-zip in the first quarter either? Like, I mean, nothing against the Packers, but this 49ers team, when they get up on you and they lean on you, it could be a long, long day. So I do think the Packers keep it close. They've been hot. They've been great. Jordan Love's been awesome. But we could both see the 49ers absolutely blowing them out. I just think it's such an advantage to be off last week. Like, Christian McCaffrey feels good. He didn't have to play through that calf injury the last couple of weeks. Trent Williams is feeling good. Debo's back. Like, they're all like, you have
talked me into it. This might be gamesmanship by you, but Stone, mark it down for the gods. I'm taking the 49ers in the points. This week we're doing the points with it because last week we didn't disagree enough. So that gives us
I'll take Packers
a little bit of points.
I'll take the Packers.
All right. So we both think the 49ers are winning the game, but the question is the coverage on it. Okay. So as we continue to break down the pressure, let's go to Sunday where we have Bucks at Lions. And I'm going to be honest with you, Frank. I'm just for a second for the point of this exercise and the point of honesty for everybody listening. Whoever we pick as the person that's under the most pressure in this game, we're kind of full of because I don't think anybody in this game really has any. Like, this is the Buccaneers and Baker have become such a great story, and the Lions and Dan Campbell have become such a great. You know who's under the most pressure? I'll tell you who's under the most pressure. Lions fans. Because look, you got to go out now. You got to go. You got to fill this place. Like, you're going to have to find the money. I heard the tickets last week from some people I know around Detroit were atrociously expensive. I know some people that showed up and then just decided they couldn't brave it. No, Lions fans, you're under pressure to get in the building because I doubt you're going to get another home playoff game. Whatever this year, whatever this one costs, it is worth it. You got to spend the money on it. Lions fans are under pressure.
Yeah, I did bring this scenario, which we don't think is going to happen, but it could. If the Packers win on Saturday, the Detroit Lions would be playing this game And the prize would be an NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers at home to go their first Super Bowl ever. And I was on Detroit radio. I do it pretty regularly. And I said it, and he agreed. The host agreed with me. That would be the biggest event in Detroit sports history. And it's not like things haven't happened in Detroit sports other than the Lions. Like Red Wings have won Stanley Cups, and we got Game 5 of the 1984 World Series. So the Pistons had 3 titles.
Boys, yeah.
Yeah, bad boy. Any of those games against the Lakers and all that. But what would be bigger for any city? Like I could even expand it. Any city, maybe like New Orleans playing the NFC Championship game, but Detroit playing Green Bay at home for the first chance to go to a Super Bowl ever. It would be something unlike anything. And I know Lions fans, I know a Lions fan out here in Colorado. He already has that look in his eye. He's told me he's sleeping on my floor in Vegas if the Lions make the Super Bowl. And he has a look in his eye of whatever those tickets would cost, I don't really even care. Like, and I think there's a lot of people that be coming from Michigan with that same attitude of the Lions made a Super Bowl. I don't care how much the tickets cost. Take my money. I don't care. My 401k, here you go. I'm going to a Lions Super Bowl because this is never supposed to happen in my lifetime. So as we talked about, great Lions story. But yes, I think just the pressure is, like you kind of said, Lions fans, the Lions as an organization, like to go, like I'm trying, like this is such a great story. Their second playoff win since 1957, first division title, 30 years. But if you lose to the Buccaneers as basically a touchdown favorite at home, it does dampen everything you've done a little bit. You'd go into the offseason feeling pretty miserable. Like if you lose to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, whatever, they're great. You had a great run. You can feel pretty good going into the offseason. If you lose to the Buccaneers at home, that's a different vibe. Not that it would erase everything, but it's a different vibe going into your offseason.
So I saw this earlier. The Lions, Rams, that's Lambs together. Lions, Rams game was the most watched primetime TV event since the Super Bowl. To give a little perspective to how many people watched the Rams and the Lions. If the Lions...
And it wasn't Rams fans. Let me tell you, Fitz. Nope. It wasn't Rams fans. I love the Rams, but no.
All 3 of them were out in droves. No, I think there is this moment where the Lions at home in the NFC Championship game against the Packers, I believe it would give you historic TV numbers for a non-Super Bowl. You would see people that have not paid attention. Like this is the closest we're going to get to what we had the World Series we mentioned not too long ago.
Don't mention them.
That's all I said. I just said that World Series. That's all. But the Lions, the way people will flock to this story, this is absolutely incredible. It is, and I'll continue to say every week, it reminds you that you're only a couple of people away. You're only a couple of smart hires away from having your moment in the NFL. And I don't know, man, like just watching that game, like I had goosebumps when they were kicking it off, watching Eminem, seeing all the legends on the sidelines. We talked about it at the time. You just see that environment and my heart just grows 2 sizes, right? Just thinking about a football fan base that frankly just deserves that moment. Like that, there isn't pressure on anybody wearing a Lions jersey. I don't believe there is because it's unprecedented success for this organization. But by God, if it goes through, like the NFL will be ear to ear smiling if somehow, some way the Lions get this done. Absolutely.
We let off talking about side piece teams. I could see a scenario in a few years where people are like, the 2023 Lions are mine. Because how can you not fall in love with this story? They're a really, really likable team. I will say on the other, we're talking about pressure. There is some pressure on Baker Mayfield here. He's on a 1-year deal. I think everybody assumes he's coming back to the Buccaneers. He played great last week. He's played great in a lot of games down the stretch. He's also struggled in some games. It's been kind of up and down. I mean, if you go just to 5 interceptions to the Lions this week, I don't think it really changes that much. The whole body work has been pretty good for Baker. I think that both sides agree we're going to bring it back. This is working for us. But look, if you go out, you're terrible in a big spot like this on the road. At least the Buccaneers would think twice about putting another 0 on that contract. You know what I mean?
I do think the one reason, and I looked up the line to make sure I had it right, the one reason I don't think there's a ton of pressure on him is he completed 61% of his passes for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against the Eagles, right? So he had playoff success. So now, yes, like you don't want to see the wheels fall off. I think you're probably right about that. But man, I have a hard time not envisioning Baker Mayfield getting a pretty fat contract at this point from Tampa Bay. I think we're probably right. So do you have the spread there? Do you know the spread on this game?
6.5. I always know the spread, man. Come on.
No, that's fair.
I always know the spread.
Lions 6.5. I'm taking Detroit in this situation.
Really? We're gonna disagree, man. We're gonna disagree.
You're taking.
I'll tell you this. I'm gonna tell you this, and I don't know if I wanna. I got a spidey sense about this game. I'm not lying. I think this Lions team is very, very good. I like them, but let's not act like there's no flaws. Their secondary is flawed. Gave up a lot to Puka Nacua last week. I talked on the podcast about how Nick Mullins had more than 800 yards against them in weeks 16 and 18. I think that, look, you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin, you got a defense that's really salty. And this defense, when it plays well, it plays really, really well. And they work great all season, but I think they have enough dudes on that defense. You saw it last week against Jalen Hurts. I just got to, look, each of the last 4 years, a road team has won in this round. In 6 of the last 7 years, a road team has won in this round. I'm sitting here saying, I don't know which of these home teams loses. So one of them's got to lose. One of them is going to surprise us. And I just have a weird sense that maybe it's the Lions. Like, would it surprise me if the Lions win 28-6? No, not really. But I just think this Buccaneers team's feisty. People may be overlooking them. I'm going to go with the Lions in the point, or the Buccaneers in the points for sure. I hope I said Buccaneers the whole time there. The Buccaneers are very, very feisty coming into this game. I think they're live. I think they're going to give the Lions a good run here. And I can't rule out them winning this game straight up.
So at this point, it sounds like you're leaning Bucks straight up. But most importantly, you're taking the Bucks side of the points in this. I'm taking the Lions side of the points of this, which means we disagree, which means the pressure is up on us now. I mean, this is starting to get, we're starting to get heated now. We got one game left, Chiefs and Bills. And this game, I did a little preview for Yahoo Sports. I talked a little bit about this. This game is so substantial for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, because I believe in order to have a great rivalry, you have to have a back and forth. And we mentioned earlier Peyton Manning, but I always think of early on when it was, well, Peyton can't beat Brady, right? And then he beat Brady. It has to happen. In order to have Manning v. Brady, both of them have to win sometimes. And I feel like we've excused every single loss the Bills have had at Arrowhead because it's at Arrowhead. And look, he had a hell of a game and it was a miraculous ending. Like, we always find the quality, but man, if this version of the Chiefs comes in to Buffalo and beats the Bills, then the Bills got to hang their head pretty low and ask themselves what's next, because that is, right now there's pressure on the Bills. There's pressure on Josh Allen. There's pressure on Sean McDermott. I would say Allen has the most pressure on him, but man, the entire organization of Buffalo should be feeling it.
To the points we've been making about Lamar, that, I mean, at some point you look at Josh Allen and all these people who want to judge everything on playoff wins and losses are going to look at Josh Allen and say, is he really great? Like, he hasn't made a Super Bowl. And it's just kind of how we judge quarterbacks. I don't love it, but it is there. And I think Josh Allen really hasn't gotten a lot of heat yet, but if you do lose in this spot as a home team against a very flawed Chiefs team, I do think the pressure comes on you. I think more just because we've kind of just anointed Josh Allen and let him be like, we're not going to criticize this guy that much. Even the interceptions, we got to just gloss over it. Like, his good plays make up for the interceptions. So I think it really, and I hate to do this, we're just head coach and a quarterback, but McDermott is the guy. Like, McDermott's the guy all of a sudden, if you lose this game, I don't think he gets fired, but I think he'd come in on a hot seat next year. As crazy as that sounds, for as much success as the Bills have had, I think that everybody would just rip Sean McDermott. I think that it would just go to, this guy's not the right coach. It's not Josh Allen. He threw 3 interceptions, but whatever. That we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Sean McDermott not being the guy. And I think that the pressure really goes on him, because this does feel like, Bills, you got to get this done. Like, you're right. The whole window closing thing is overdone. I do it too. I'm guilty of that. But it also doesn't stay open forever. It's not going to stay open for the Bills forever. And you got to wonder, if you keep passing on these, if you keep missing these opportunities, how many more do you have in your future? So they got to get that. I think they really, truly have to get this done this weekend.
I feel like part of it is not even just a window closing. It's just like, what's going to change, right? So an analogy I use often for anyone that hasn't heard us talk about this, but this is the way I now look at the NFL. I look at the NFL as great 80s wrestling tag teams. And so it's not about, do you have a quarterback? You have to have the quarterback and the coach. You have to have two. So you have to have the tag team in a way that they complement each other, in the way that they really become this force. You have to take them down, right? So great tag teams are what it takes, in my mind, to win Super Bowls. So you don't have to be the best. You have to be hot at the right time, all of these different things. But right now, I'm looking at the tag team of Andy Reid and Mahomes, and I'm saying that tag team walks into the ring nice and slow, carrying their belts. They unload out everything. They walk into the ring, they look around, because the one thing they know is that no matter what, McDermott and Allen haven't found a way to beat him. McDermott and Allen can't get it done when it matters the most. McDermott and Allen together is not a tandem that scares Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Looking at the tag team matchups of this, if this was WrestleMania 732 and you got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in one side and Sean McDermott and Josh Allen in the other, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes win. So if you're the Bills, you better figure out now that you're getting this match at your home stadium, now that you're getting this match in your environment, now that you control the variables more than anybody in the world, because it's your system, it's your hotels, it's the things you're used to every day. If you can't win this, then you're going to have to look in the mirror really hard and say, what are we changing to be able, because Mahomes and Andy Reid aren't changing. They're a constant. So if they're a constant and they constantly kick your ass, then you better figure out what you're going to change in the playoffs to get it done.
And it was getting a home game. That's what changes. Now you got to take advantage of it. By the way, I just want to know who's Nikolai Volkov singing the Russian national anthem in this whole tag team thing. Like
I'm
maybe
telling
Andy
you.
Reid like that. I want to see that. Like that'd be my jam.
Andy Reid is a little bit more like George the Animal Steel. Like he's just coming, like he's just sort of wild. You don't know what to expect. I don't know. There's this version of Reid and Mahomes too. They're so dang likable. Look, really I'm a Raiders fan, and every time I see that, he's like, "Tell me again with the Nugs," and his little fingers go across the tip.
Phenomenal.
Like,
it's great. Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Real quick, is there any pressure on the Chiefs here? I mean, I hate being like, there's no pressure on the Chiefs. They've already won titles. It's a playoff. These guys are highly motivated individuals. They want to win as many titles as they can. So I think there's pressure there. What pressure is there on the Chiefs, though, to keep this dynasty going? Because I think we all assume they're going to be around forever. Like, it's not like if they lose, they're going away.
I don't think there's pressure on the Chiefs. I think there's sneaky pressure on Travis Kelce, because Kelce hasn't played well. Let's separate the whole Taylor Swift conversation for a minute, because, by the way, if you're a grown-ass man and you have a hard time dealing with the fact that Taylor Swift's on the broadcast, you might want to look in the mirror and ask yourself why.
I totally agree.
I do not care. You should not care. Frankly, if it brings more people to want to watch football, none of us should care. Just sit down, shut up about Taylor Swift. That being said, Travis Kelce has not played well. He had 3 drops last week where he was looking at his hands and he was yelling at himself. I think there's a little bit of pressure on Kelce because he hasn't played up to the Kelce standard over the back half of the season. And that's going to raise, if they go out in this game and they lose and Kelce plays poorly in the process, there are going to be a lot of questions about if he's hit that proverbial wall in his career.
Yeah, at his age, only one tight end in NFL history. It had a 1,000-yard season, and it happened, I believe, back in 1965. It was in the 60s. So what he's done at his age is already unprecedented. But you're right. Really didn't play well for the last 2 months of the season, 2.5 months of the season. You start to wonder, is he gone from great to good? He's obviously still a good tight end. He had 990 yards a season or whatever it was. But can he be great still? I think you're right. I think that we've spent so much time talking about the Chiefs receivers. The Chiefs receivers stink, and they do. But what's gotten missed a little bit is that Kelce has not been great. He has not been a dominant force that we're used to. It's hard to look. That kind of stinks for him. He set his own bar. It's hard to cross that bar as one of the greatest tight ends of all time. But we look at Travis Kelce and where he is right now, and you're right. If he goes out, they lose, and he has 3 catches for 32 yards, we're going to say, is Kelce really a guy you can still build your offense around? And I think it would be a fair question.
All right. So what's the line on this game?
This will be -3 for your Buffalo Bills. -3.
And how are you leaning on this one?
I love the Bills. And I'm just going to get it out of the way right now. It is stupid to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I totally get that. They might make me feel stupid. We're watching the Bills dejected going back to the locker room as Mahomes celebrates coming off the field. I've seen this in my head. I've done it before. I've fallen for this trap. But I just believe in the Bills. I believe this is the Bills season. Maybe they lose to the Ravens. I don't know. Whatever. We'll deal with that next week. But to make the playoffs the way they did, fighting back from having a 14% chance to make the playoffs, I just think that this team at home, I get it, short week, injuries, blah, blah, blah. I just think that this team is equipped really, really well right now. And this line surprised me a little bit because have we forgotten the Chiefs really weren't great this year? Lost to your Raiders at home, lost to some teams, lost to the Broncos, lost to teams they really had no business losing to. And now they're going to go to Buffalo and win? I don't buy that. I think this is the Bills' time. I think this is maybe not their destiny, quote unquote, but I do believe this is the time for the Bills to make a deep run.
Frank, you're wrong. And look, it's a beautiful analysis by you. It's beautiful analysis by you. But here's a couple of things and a couple of reasons that I'm taking. I think Kansas City wins outright, but particularly I'll take the points on this for Kansas City. This comes down to a couple of things that I think are important. One, Kansas City's defense has played well this year. Two, the Bills' defense is a shell of itself right now because of injuries. I mean, they are as decimated as the Dolphins in many ways. Now, the way you beat the Chiefs is you get after them with your pass rush. They still have some guys that can do that in Buffalo. I think they will be able to be disruptive.
Yeah, is Von Miller going to come out of retirement this week? Is Von going to play some time?
It is.
We're talking about Travis Kelce may hit the wall.
I mean, you're not wrong. And the inability, the ability to get after Mahomes is going to be key here. I think two things offensively have changed in the last few weeks of the season. Rashee Rice has really blown himself up into becoming a playmaker that's hard to handle. Yes. And Isaiah Pacheco is running violently hard at this point. I love watching what he's doing. I don't think they're going to rely on Mahomes to win this game, play in and play out. They're going to rely on Isaiah Pacheco, and then they're going to let Mahomes do what Mahomes does. He's going to break down defenses at the worst time for them. This feels like a really close game, but through it all, I don't trust anybody other than Mahomes, Pacheco, and Rashee on that offense.
And that's enough. Just listen to yourself. Take a step back and say, okay, we're going into this playoff game at Buffalo, one of the best teams of football. And Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice are going to take it home. I don't know, man. I don't know. I get it. Mahomes is going to make his plays. I know what you're saying. I totally do. But you're right in your analysis of this is kind of a Pacheco game. It's going to be really snowy and cold and all that kind of stuff. Isaiah Pacheco? I like Isaiah Pacheco, but I don't know that he's the type of dude who I'm like, oh my God, we just watched the Isaiah Pacheco game.
I'm just worried. I feel like at this point, every single time there's a tackle, somebody on the Bills defense is slow to get up. You can only give them so much. I mean, I get it. It's just, and that last game, the field was so hard. Every single time people were bouncing off of it, you just looked at it and thought that looks violent, right? There is an element here where that's my biggest concern is a paper thin Bills defense, for the second straight week.
Totally fair. I get it.
Better to be lucky than good. And for the second straight week, the Chiefs are going to be taking on a defense that is just, ravaged by injuries. We'll see. So, we'll see how it plays. I love the idea. Maybe I'm damaged through all of this from having watched too much Mahomes. I will say that right now, if I could have any pick of a Super Bowl, I still think the Super Bowl we're most likely to get is Ravens 49ers. The Super Bowl I'd like to get the most is Bills versus Lions. What say you?
Oh, I mean, how could I say anything else other than Bills Lions? I think Bills 49ers would be great. Any combination of Bills, Ravens, 49ers is phenomenal. But those, as I sit here, I've talked about this a lot, and this has been a weird NFL season, so maybe this changes. I still think there's only 3 contenders. I really do. Any of the other 5 that win, I think we'd be pretty shocked. I think we'd be
3 contenders. Whoa. Who you say there are 3 contenders?
Bills, Ravens, and 49ers. And that's it. Those are the only teams I can see winning a Super Bowl. I really, truly believe that. And I know that's really disrespectful to the other 5, but do any of these teams, if you were wow, the Detroit Lions won a Super Bowl, I'd be pretty shocked by that. Detroit Lions aren't bad, but they just don't seem to be a Super Bowl quality team.
I think the Lions are more of a Super Bowl contender right now than the Bills are.
Just because of injuries?
Yeah, because the injuries to the defensive side of the ball particularly. And let's be real, the knock that's really hurt the Lions over the last month were turnovers, right? In general, that got cleaned up quickly. If Jared Goff holds on to the football and takes care of the football, man, this Lions team's tough to beat. And Laporta being able to play in any shell of himself is an unexpected sort of woohoo that we didn't think we were going to get dynamic to that offense. I'm looking particularly at the Lions and saying you got enough playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, and you certainly can score on anybody. So I would put the Lions. I would give you 3 contenders. I just most likely would go 49ers, Lions, and Ravens in that. If the Lions were taking on the Ravens in the AFC Championship game, I wouldn't feel great about Baltimore, just like I don't feel I feel like the Lions are a better contender than we're giving them credit for.
It's perfectly fair. I get it. I guess some of their defensive issues down the stretch sour me on them. At the end of the day, I can't see the Lions beating the 49ers in Santa Clara. I just can't get myself there unless something weird, Brock Purdy, every tip pass is intercepted like the Ravens game or whatever.
That's what a crazy difference the season makes, because I would feel wild. You tell me how you feel. I would feel wildly different about 49ers Lions if that game was in Detroit.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, Detroit, that's a legitimate home field advantage. I mean, you could feel it through your TV. Like I didn't go obviously last week, but you could feel like that is a legit home field advantage. But I mean, Niners rested. I just don't see the Niners losing. Not in the NFC. Super Bowl, maybe for sure. But that's why I have such a small group of contenders, and maybe you could talk. You probably have talked me into the Lions. Maybe the Lions can outscore them. They can make enough plays on defense. I just can't get there to get them over the 49ers. That's all.
I think the one thing we've learned is no matter what happens, there's so much pressure on so many players. We'll overreact to it, which we will do next week. Speaking of overreactions, let's get some overreactions and normal reactions now from the great Michael Lombardi. All right, so sometimes I got to pick up the bat phone and I got to hope the signal hits the air and Michael Lombardi comes in and gives me some expertise, because, Michael, you've been in these situations and there's so much news this week around coaching and the carousel. I want to get your thoughts. Let's start with the most shocking thing for a lot of people. Jerry Jones decides not to move on from Mike McCarthy. What did you make of it?
See, I think everybody misread this. There was a narrative out there about, Jerry's 83 and he's getting to the end and he wants to win desperately. Well, look, I'm old. I'm not that old, but I'm old. And I think when you get older, you become more set in your ways. Change becomes really difficult, right? When I worked with Al Davis, as he got older, change became really hard for him. Like, it was just something he couldn't really handle, didn't want to go through it, would rather repair than replace. And I think McCarthy gets a horrible reputation. I really do. I think there's a narrative out there that no one likes him, right? And no one pays attention to his numbers. Nobody looks at it. They just say it's Aaron Rodgers, right? So when you break him down, and I'm not defending the game. I thought the performance of his team on last Sunday was atrocious. Let's put that there. But, John Harbaugh's 160 and 99. McCarthy's 167 and 102, right? They both won one Super Bowl. Mike Tomlin's 173 and 100, okay? Sean Payton's 160 and 98, exact same record. Won one Super Bowl, okay? So, like, let's stop this. Like Jerry's sitting there saying, there's a lot of good things that Mike did, right? And I'd rather fix what Mike did good than who am I going to get? And you say, well, hire Belichick. Great. He's the better coach, no question. I'm not disagreeing there. However, the way Jerry does business, the way they run their organization would be foreign to Bill. It would be something that he's not used to. And that would change a lot of the dynamics inside Jerry's own home. And as you get older, changing things inside your home, Al Davis ate the same thing every single day. He don't want to change anything. So I think that's it. And people, do you realize, Fitz, let me ask you, who's the winningest coach in Cowboy history?
Is it McCarthy at this point?
McCarthy has 62% winning percentage. Now, Barry Switzer had the same, but Barry Switzer was related, really, at the end of the day, Barry Switzer was related to the Jimmy Johnson era. He took that over. And Jimmy paid a horrible price because he started with such a bad team. The fact that he hanged on to Jason Garrett, who has a 55% winning percentage, was more out of loyalty and love for Garrett than his performance.
And I think, that's something I've referenced several times talking about the Cowboys, is I think we have this concept of Jerry Jones being quick trigger with this when in fact he's not. To everything that you just said, isn't that proof positive that more likely than not, whatever it takes to continue to have Dak as their quarterback long term, they're simply going to do?
Right. And remember, we weren't talking this time last year because we weren't friends, not because we were mad at one another, but we weren't talking. Everybody out there, all the report, everybody, getting rid of Kellen Moore was the biggest mistake you could ever make. Kellen Moore's what's kept that thing together. Their offense got 10 times better when he let Moore go. But nobody brings that up because the narrative on Mike is not very popular. And so that narrative was out there all spring. Mike can't run the offense. He's a horrible play caller, yada, yada, yada. And then the offense is having record time. Nobody says he's doing a great job. Jerry has to, at least you have to recognize. Now, everybody says, well, they underachieved. They did? Really? Did you break down their team? Their offensive line is not very good. That's why they don't play well on the road. They struggle. Dak is very inconsistent. Dak's not the top 5 quarterback in the league. He played well this year, but you're not sitting there saying, would I rather have this guy? Dak's good. He's paid great, but he's good. And defensively, they lost some guys. Micah Parsons is great, but they can't really cover man-to-man against good receivers. They're not a zone team. This proves my point, what we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the pod. There's only two people in every organization that are paid to win, the head coach and the general manager. Everybody else can do whatever. They just have to do their job well. Dan Quinn has got 4 head coaching interviews, and that was as bad a performance by his defense by anybody. But yet he's got 4 head coaching interviews. So I think what Jerry's saying is I'd rather repair than replace.
So when you start talking about replace, you mentioned Belichick's name. It should be mentioned at this point, Belichick, it looks like going for a second interview with the Falcons. Like, I'm trying to figure out what the hell that even looks like, because there's in my mind, there's no way the Falcons are interviewing Bill. It's got to be the opposite, right? But you know Belichick well. When you think Belichick and Falcons, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, the first interview was I got to get to know you and you got to get to know me, right? This is a partnership that hopefully will last for a while. I don't know you. We've seen each other at owners' meetings, but I've never sat in a room and had a conversation or understood who you are, nor do you understand who I am. You've seen me through the media. I've seen you through the media, right? We really don't know. And so they spend 3.5 hours on I think Arthur Blank's ship or yacht or whatever the hell you want to call it, and they get to know one another. And Arthur shares with him his view of the organization. He takes that information and he goes back up to his home, and then they decide through conversations, okay, let's have another talk. And now this one becomes a little bit more of discovery. How does this work? How does that work? What's the protocols here? Who's good? Okay, this is what I believe. This is what I want. And then it becomes some of that. And then Bill will probably return and digest that. And then from there, either it's good to go or it's not.
Feels like a slow and calculated process, right? Like, I think that's one thing, because a lot of people just expect immediate result in this. But to your point, it feels like if you're Bill and any team that he might be talking to, there's nothing wrong with slowing down and dating for a second before you decide to put a ring on it, right?
Right. Well, my favorite line about Belichick, and I've been saying this for 35 years, if Belichick built homes, okay, if he was in the home building business, he would build one home a year. It'd be the finest home you've ever seen. He's not going to build a track neighborhood. Like, he's not doing that. Like, he's a custom builder. And when you're a custom builder, it takes time. And he's a custom team builder. And if he doesn't have it all aligned, it ain't going to work.
So if you were looking around the league right now, Bill to the Falcons, is that the opportunity that from your mindset makes the most sense?
It does. I mean, it's not a signature franchise. It's not an elite, Well, when you win, you make that, right? And I think the owner is more important than anybody. And Arthur Blank seems to want to have a structure and a system in place that adheres to the things that maybe Bill wants to do. Remember, Jimmy Johnson and Jerry broke up because of the systems that Jerry didn't want to keep running, that Jimmy was getting too much credit for. It's all about that relationship. That's what makes jobs today really good. Because, look, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, we got TikTok. Everybody wants the coach fired after a game. Here's what I want to ask you, Fitz. Everybody who wants Mike McCarthy fired, are they going to want John Harbaugh fired if the Texans beat him this weekend?
Oh, God, no. No, of course not. No.
Of course not. But when they look at the records, they're exactly the same.
This is where, and I always come back, this is an analogy I've used often, so forgive me if I've told you this story before, but years ago, Bono was doing an interview, and he was talking about the fact that it took U2 3 records to figure out who they were as a band. He said, we didn't really hit our stride till the 3rd record. And this interview was talking about was the fact that he said at the time, you don't even get 3 singles anymore in the music business. Like, if you haven't started to produce hits right away, you're out. It is an interesting concept that we judge coaches, every coach, differently based on the shield that they have on their chest when they're doing it, based on the way we perceive the brand of the team that they play for, whether or not we thought the team was going to suck coming in versus where they are now. Like, all of these variables that have nothing to do with actual job performance become sort of, even if it's subconscious, they become biases in the way that we cover so many coaches. It's pretty strange to me that there's no one universal application of greatness when it comes to how we judge coaches.
Well, it's like Belichick said when he went to his press conference. I haven't seen this many people here since Tim Tebow. It's, what story do you want to sell? That's the business that we're in. People that run the media companies have certain agendas and stories. The agenda is to get Mike McCarthy out. The agenda was Mike Tomlin's going to take time to think about his future. He thought about an hour and he was back. Like, that wasn't even a story, right? But we wanted to keep it a story. And so it's the same thing.
And Michael, I don't mean to cut you off, but my God, man, we've done this with the Cowboys. How many? Let's add Jason Garrett to the conversation of, at one point it was, well, they're never going to get a deal done with Zeke, which they did. And then it was, there's problems. They haven't signed Dak to a long-term deal, only to find out later the problem was they wanted him for even more time. And now it's, they got to fire McCarthy. Like, how many times are we going to yell from the mountaintops incorrectly about the Cowboys before, as a media group, we learn to sit down, shut up, color in our books, and wait till things actually happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all over. It's an epidemic. We're crying. Because we have social media, people want these guys fired immediately. Some guy's in his basement in his underwear in Des Moines eating meatloaf, and he starts tweeting out he wants the coach fired, and he's never looked at the records.
Oh, are you a big meatloaf? Michael Lombardi liking the meatloaf? Is the meatloaf go-to thing?
Well,
I mean,
that's usually something that you can eat while you're watching something. It's better in a sandwich than it is out there. But look, it's the world we live in. Nobody looks at the record. Everybody thinks it's easy to win 160 games. Like McCarthy just had. Now, again, I thought they were unprepared. I think they took Green Bay lightly. I don't disagree with that. But he shouldn't have to. Should he have to pay a freight when the head coach if Baltimore loses? When they lost to Tennessee, did anybody want John Harbaugh fired after that game? They blamed everything on Lamar. That's the narrative. See, it's whatever the narrative is. And as viewers and people listen to this podcast, you got to stay away from the narrative. You got to make your own narrative.
So what's the narrative in your mind on Jim Harbaugh? Because I'll tell you, I'll bias this question before I even talk to you. Like, I was at Media Days for the National Championship game. I saw Harbaugh. I talked to a bunch of the players. He's so beloved. And through all the controversy, the players, the boosters, the fans, they all look at him like a god that's like this martyr that's gone through this unjust treatment. And then I hear all these reports from college football people I trust that there's a deal on the table for him that would pay him anywhere from $115 to $140 million, depending on the incentives and where they come into. Ain't no NFL team going to pay him $115 million, Michael. So, like, I have a hard time. You talk about narratives. I have a hard time piecing together a narrative that brings Harbaugh to the NFL simply because the money and the hero status that he has in college football feels kind of untouchable. Am I missing something? No,
but you're missing. You don't understand the guy. The guy's the most competitive human being on planet Earth. I sat at Piedmont High School Stadium with his son playing football and my son playing football. And he was telling me he's going to go to the University of San Diego to take the head coaching job. And I said, Jim, this is the dumbest thing you could do. And he did it and won. Then he went to Stanford and won. Then he went to San Francisco and won. Then he went to Michigan and won. Like, the guy's not going to back down to a challenge. And he's a great team builder. He's a great team builder. And look, if you're the Chargers and you have some internal struggles within the family, and maybe selling the team might be the next best thing based on the value of these franchises today. Look, we haven't talked enough about this, but when Dan Snyder gets $6.1 billion for their team, you don't think other owners are sitting there saying, wait a minute, right? If I hire Harbaugh, what's the value of my team? So I think you got to play that into your conversation.
So in your mind, if you're putting him in the NFL, the Chargers make the most sense?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. I think they need him. They need everything he brings to the table and then some. Now, I do think he's got a loyalty to Michigan, and he's connected. I spoke to their team this summer, and I left there, and they were the most connected team I'd ever been around. I saw it. I've talked about it on my show on VSiN. He is a great team builder. There's no question.
So what do you do? I know I ask you about the Raiders a lot, but what do you do if you're the Raiders and you have Antonio Pierce, who feels like an absolutely perfect person right now to step in, but at the same time, you're realizing that if you don't hire Harbaugh, there's a real good chance the Chargers will. Now all of a sudden you're taking on Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and Andy Reid for the next however many years. Like, should Harbaugh influence the decision-making process for Mark Davis when it comes to who to hire as a coach?
I don't think he can, because I think he's backed himself into a corner. I think he's backed himself in a corner that he's listened to the players to get rid of McDaniels. He needs to listen to the players to keep Pierce.
That'll be wild to see, because there's a very good chance the person that he could have hired will be coaching against him twice a year. So we'll see how that plays out. One other coaching move, got to get your thoughts on. The Eagles only a year removed from a Super Bowl now. Sirianni is, according to multiple reports, he's basically making his proposal to the front office of what's going to happen. How unheard of, first and foremost, is that, from what you understand, for a coach to have to come in and resell himself?
Well, I think what he's not selling himself, he's got to sell that he knows what's wrong, right? Like, there's a lot wrong in Philly, right? They look like they didn't practice. They weren't in shape. They didn't adjust. They didn't fix the problems after their bye week that were there, and they remained. And if you're the head coach, that's your job. Your job is to see distantly in the future. I can remember in 2014, we just lost to the Packers when I was at the Patriots, and Belichick, we went to San Diego. We spent a week out there, and he and I were in a room together sharing offices. And in that whole conversation wasn't about playing the Chargers. It was about, what do we have to do to win the Super Bowl? What moves do we need to make now? And what can we do to help our team in 2015? That's the job of, Al Davis used to say, the key to any successful organization is to anticipate problems, not react. Nick didn't. And Nick's going to have to sit in front of Jeffrey Lurie and say, I made a mistake with this coach. I made a mistake here. I didn't do a good job here. I didn't do a good enough control on the strength and conditioning. We weren't in shape. And give him the answers to what he sees. That's the key. And if he comes in with, well, it's not my fault, it's this guy, then I think Jeffrey's got to make another decision.
Is it already broken if you get to this point, or do you believe that they can mend through this process?
Well, I think it depends on the humility that Nick brings to the table. Nick's never really been a humble guy, right? He's kind of got himself his head over his skis a little bit here, and he's been kind of landed on third base. And this organization, so we're clear, has done a good job of helping him. That's the Eagles are different than a lot of organizations. They help the head coach. They don't expect the head coach to lead them. Okay. And so, I think Nick's going to have to do it with humility.
Well, you do it with humility every day. Michael hosts the Lombardi Line. That airs on VSiN, VSIN, weekdays, 1 p.m. Eastern, and weekends, 10 a.m. Eastern, as well as the weekly GM Shuffle podcast. Check out all of Michael's NFL takes at VSiN, Michael, my friend, thanks for the insight as always.
Thank you so much, Fitz.
Frank and I will be back Sunday night Blitz. Look, barring weather, maybe we can only give you one night this week. I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. But Sunday Night Blitz is the party you do not want to miss as we react to every single game from the weekend. Follow us on social media, too. I'm at Jason Fitz. Give Stone a follow out there. He's doing God's work. Puts up with me every week. Come on now. At SJ Rochelle, our producer behind the glass. Leave us that 5-star review. Rate, subscribe. Tell your friends, your family, your enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us every single week. We'll be back next Thursday with more Zero Blitz.